Hi, welcome back to section 1. Let's go straight into the deposition of Mr. Afra Raymond. Do we have Mr. Raymond online?
Pretty sure I'm here. Can you hear me and see me?
I could hear and see you.
Hi, good day. How are you?
I'm very good. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So we're down to some serious business.
Yes.
Mr. Raymond, you on record, I think, as saying that you think that we've made a mockery, I believe is the word, of the Procurement Act by these amendments. Tell us, I mean, why do you see no utility in the Act going forward?
Well, the Act has utility because half a loaf is better than none.
Right.
At the moment, we have a very minimal series of controls. In other words, enforceable and effective controls over public contracting. And what the Act was designed to do, that is the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act, the 2015 Act that we call the parent legislation.
Yes.
What that was designed to do was to give proper oversight of all transactions in public money.
Right.
As well as disposals of public property. And I would pause here for your information and the information of viewers to say that the phrase public property, it is not literally the property you and I are talking about. So I have a property to sell you in Chaguanas. You buy the property from me. It includes real property, real estate.
Yes.
But it includes a great many other things that are the property belonging to the state of Trinidad and Tobago. Yes?
Yes.
And therefore, the phrase public property includes what in law they call real and personal property.
Yes.
There are two phrases they use to kind of span the division, okay? Now, the changes that were brought about by these amendments, the amendments were approved in Parliament. The amendments were approved on Friday the 4th by the lower house, which is the House of Representatives, and they were approved on Tuesday the 8th by the upper house, which is the Senate. And they were approved by simple majority, and those amendments really have three effects. And I'd like to tell you what are the three effects that I view as seriously detrimental to what we intended to do. The first effect is that government-to-government arrangements have been removed from the oversight of the Office of Procurement Regulation, which means that government-to-government arrangements will continue to take place outside of any independent supervision, because that's what happens at the moment. That's what has been happening for a very long time, and a great many of them are unsatisfactory. But the biggest problem in government-to-government arrangements is it's a little bit like a magic trick, where there's a black box on the stage of the magician, and you know the black box has a trick in it, but you don't know what's in it, whether it's a rabbit, whether it's a duck, whether there's a lady in a little outfit with something in her hand. We don't know what's in the black box. So in fact, we actually don't know what is the content of the government-to-government arrangements that the country has entered. We don't know, apart from occasional speeches that people would give and so on. The actual agreements are not published. The second thing is that public-private partnerships have also effectively been excluded from the public procurement, the oversight of the Office of Procurement Regulation. I think I remember the chap who was introducing me to this show telling me that one of you all was an attorney. Which one of you is it?
Both of us. Both of us are lawyers,
Oh my goodness. Well, in fact, I was making a joke with him. I was saying to him, I'm very nervous around lawyers, and I don't like to be in a room with two of them. But in fact, because it's virtual, I feel better, you know?
Yeah, well.
But seriously, there's a very interesting reading of Section 7, the amendments to Section 7, that was given by the Law Association. It was issued very late, in my opinion, my honest opinion. The Law Association's opinion is extremely valuable in terms of analyzing what has been coming before the population.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know, they say timing is everything. It was released, I think, the same morning as the Senate hearing. So it came out after the lower house had already voted to approve these amendments. And it's a pity that those statements could not have been made into the public domain and the minds of the population the week before the lower house voted. But anyway, be that as it may, paragraph 17 of the Law Association statement is one in which the writers delve into the meaning of Section 7. And like myself, they amended Section 7.
Yeah.
And like myself, 7 subsection 2.
Right.
And like myself, they come to the same conclusion that the government-to-government arrangements and public-private partnerships have both effectively been excluded.
Right.
And to put the thing in context for the viewers, is that in fact those are the two largest vehicles for creating large-scale public projects in this country.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with whether you voted for Mrs. Prasad Besessa or Dr. Rowley or any of that stuff. The fact is that in terms of how the country's business is really conducted,
that's the lion's share of
large-scale
contracts.
business is in those two things. Yes,
yeah.
That is without any question of any political party or anything. So,
right.
And the third point I wanted to make. So the first point was government to government. The second point was public-private partnerships, and the third point, a fresh clause number 5, a subsection number 5 was inserted in section 7, and subsection number 5 created a number of exemptions.
Yeah.
So, for example, legal services were exempted, accounting and auditing services were exempted, financial services were exempted. I understand that has now been amended to read that as financial services in support of the national budget.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay?
Yes, correct.
And that amendment doesn't really give me any comfort. I'll come to that just now. And of course, there was medical services, and that has also been amended now, I think, from what I read, to limit it to emergency situations.
Emergency situations.
If it's an emergency, it's outside of the OPR.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a catch-all that says that
the minister, anything could be
can add things in his determination going forward.
By order.
Now again,
Anything he decides.
it's interesting.
Yeah.
You see, mechanism is a kind of game.
Yeah.
So there are two mechanisms to approve these things in Parliament. One of them is the affirmative resolution that we would be more familiar with.
Yeah.
When a proposal is tabled, it is debated.
Yes.
Everybody has a say, and then it's voted on, and so on. Fine. And then, of course, there's a thing called a negative resolution, which we know a lot less about.
Yes.
And a negative resolution is when regulations that have normally been agreed by some competent authority just laid in Parliament.
Yeah, you have a certain amount of time to challenge it.
Yeah, you have 40 days to challenge it. Yeah. Now, when this proposal came forward, that was last week, Monday, the written proposal to change the law, those changes in subsection 5, those exemptions, and the right of the minister to add something, a fifth item to the list, was in fact subject to approval by negative resolution,
right.
which of course I thought was a bad thing. I didn't make much of it, and as it happens, that was a little cookie or sweetie that was in the act, because I mean, some of us out here a little while now, so we have seen these sorts of the games have levels, okay?
Yeah.
So you put a cookie in there, and if people are really fighting up and the children giving trouble, you give them a sweetie.
Give them something.
You give the children a dynamite.
Yes.
And
they feel satisfied.
Quiet. Yeah, they keep them satisfied. Because let's step back from all of this, colleagues. What we had happening in Parliament on the Friday in particular, the Tuesday was a little less painful.
Right.
But on the Friday in particular, I have to say from both sides, I was pained. I was pained by the poor arguments put forward by the government in support of these proposed changes.
Yeah.
And I was also pained by the opposition. I felt that the way that they dissected it and the way that they tackled it was quite weak.
Right.
But I was more pained by the government. And I want to just make my points this way. Mr. Imbut made much of the fact that some of the people who had been commentating about the act and so on, and the proposed amendments were not knowledgeable people. We didn't know what we were talking about. He didn't call any names, but some of us know we're talking about it. We don't know what we're talking about. We never did any research, a whole lot of stuff. And Mr. Imbut cited, in support of his submissions, a lot of findings from the European Union, OECD, and he made the examples that in those states, they have something called a public-to-public agreement.
Yeah.
And in fact, within the European Union, it's possible to have an agreement between Germany, let us say, and France.
Yeah, within the union.
Italy and France.
Within a union.
That in fact, when this agreement is taking place, public to public, it is excluded explicitly from the national procurement arrangements.
Correct. Because that's union law.
Now, of course, but the point is this: I have a serious difficulty with that. Because what we are being asked to believe, you see, it's very important to deconstruct things in my view. What we are being asked to believe there is that, in fact, an approach that is appropriate for developed countries, they're not identical, of course, but they're at a similar level of development. For an approach that is adequate and proper for countries on that similar level of development could be adequate and proper for a country the size of Trinidad and Tobago, dealing with a country 100 or 200 times our size.
Mr. Raymond, that public-to-public agreements, let's say for your example, France and Germany, but within the union law, that
Yes.
has been in development for some time now,
Absolutely.
right? And then we have
Absolutely.
now we have an act that hasn't really been in place that we have now, the Procurement Act, and it hasn't been
Yes.
tested. But
No, it hasn't been tested.
so the France and Germany example is a good one.
But Mr. Raymond, as we're talking about arguments, right? Let me put to you what
Sure.
Mr. Imbert, Honorable Mr. Imbert said in the Parliament, right? This is one of
Yes.
the justifications, and maybe we could
Yes.
deal with that, right? So let's
Sure.
get down to dissecting. He said, what we are saying and what we on this side have been saying for years, and we have not diverted from our position, if it is beneficial to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and it is alleged it was for the construction and financing of the Couva Hospital, if that is considered beneficial to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and this is the key part, the government of Trinidad and Tobago should have the flexibility to negotiate that contract with the government of China or any other sovereign government in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It is absurd to demand that an arrangement with a foreign government must be administered by a non-elected person. So his argument there, and in my view, that is the argument that a lot of dictators use, right? Basically to say that we need flexibility, so let's throw process out the window. I mean, I don't want to influence your view, but
Sure.
but what do you think
It's
about
good to have
that
a discussion.
argument?
Well, you see, I'll answer you.
Yeah.
Let me answer you by moving. So I dealt with the question of scale.
Yes.
Let me answer you by holding that point in my mind, and I'm going to shift focus now to what was Dr. Rowley's main submission.
Right.
Now, Dr. Rowley is a very experienced public servant, been a public servant his whole life, 71 years old. He's held top positions, and he's a very eloquent, learned guy. Okay?
Fair enough.
And Dr. Rowley's submission was in two parts. The first part, he spoke about the ferry in Australia with himself and Stuart Young.
Yeah.
So they were down in Australia for something. I forget whether it's a Commonwealth heads of government thing. But they were down in that part of the world. They met the Australian PM. They went to see some boats. What the Australians had was good. They signed an agreement. The boats are on their way. I think one boat might be here already or something. The boats are on their way. The thing is above board. It's proper. It's a good example of a government that really works in the country's interest. Yes?
Yes.
So the first thing Dr. Rowley was saying is that we, i.e. PNM, can be trusted to manage government-to-government arrangements in the public interest.
Yeah.
Just to summarize what he was saying in the first point.
Yeah,
The second point was,
Yeah.
those people over there, which is the UNC, the opposition, those people over there can't be trusted. And a lot of examples were given about things that had gone wrong and allegations of this and that and so on. Fine.
Yeah.
And I asked the question, because you see, I don't have to know about votes. I don't know anything about votes. But I know about logic, and I know about what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. Let's sit back and look at what's being said to us. If on the one hand, your government, which is the PNM, is ready, willing, and able, and they regularly execute projects in a proper fashion that are in the public interest, then you could have no difficulty whatsoever fitting into a modern independent system of oversight.
Yes.
If we go to the second point, if indeed the other side are rascals
Yeah.
and not to be trusted, and they come out to thief public money, and you have to be careful with those people.
Then
If
we
that
should
is indeed
also-
the case,
Then we
if
should
that is
definitely
the case,
implement the law.
Yeah.
then you definitely, if you are responsible
Yeah, government.
as a leader, as a long-time public servant of this country's interests, and you have the opportunity to put in place a framework that will control the rascals,
Yeah.
why didn't you do it?
Why don't you do
Exactly.
it? Yeah, exactly.
What
That's the
nonsense.
point.
So the statement was eloquent, but it was absolutely risible. It made no sense.
But
And it goes back to the point, Mr. But the same point you
Yeah,
were making.
correct.
Is you all right with that? Yeah.
yeah. But Dr. Raymond, one of the things that
It's just Mr.
yeah, Mr. Raymond, one of the
Raoul
things
is a doctor,
one of the
yeah.
things that
Yeah.
I think you would have to give them
Yes.
some appreciation for is that
Sure.
the procurement regulator is vested with a lot of power. So when
Yes,
you have,
yes.
let's say, challenge proceedings, which is in the act, and you
Yes.
have someone taking issue with a procurement process that took place,
Yes.
the procurement regulator could get in there and he could make certain orders, produce documents, he could stop the process, he could make any order that he sees fit, right?
Yes.
And that's in the act. Of course, that
Yes,
would be
yes.
subject to the Constitution and rights and that sort of thing, but that's a different
Sure.
argument. If you have government-to-government arrangements being subjected to that type of scrutiny, are we saying A, that we want the procurement regulator to have that power and supervision
Yes.
over government-to-government? Or are we saying that we would accept a watered-down version of it and say, well, in the least, the document should be made public for public scrutiny, and the procurement regulator could take a look at it and make findings if there is wrongdoing, but he ought not to have the power to stop these proceedings? Because one of the points that Mr. Imbert there is making is that, look, we are elected officials. There has to be some level of autonomy given to us to enter into state-to-state relationships, so that, you know, how do we, I mean, you see that there is, I wouldn't go so far as to say there's full merit in it, but there is an issue there. If we allow the procurement regulator to have oversight of state-to-state arrangements, government-to-government contracts,
Yes.
are we still going to want him to have that type of power over the state, or is it that we would accept a watered-down version where he simply has oversight and publication requirements, let's say?
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Let me
Right.
answer you very straightforwardly to say, yes, I would want the proper oversight of
Yeah.
the regulator over all transactions.
Right.
Just to answer you directly.
Yes.
Because, and particularly because in this particular area, what is happening here is a frank difference of opinion between the point of view advanced by Mr. Imbert and
Yeah.
the point of view we are advancing, those of us, because we wrote the law,
Yes.
we lobbied for it,
Yeah.
and I continue to lobby for it.
Right.
And there's a genuine difference of opinion here. And my opinion is founded on history. The history of our country with government arrangements. If you go back, and it's a long time back, you all are two young men. If you go back to the Bala report of 1982,
Yeah.
these are substantive commission of inquiry commissioned by a PNM government, Lord Chambers.
Yeah.
And Bala actually, Lennox Bala was his name, he actually dismantles the government-to-government arrangements, he dismantles them and explains that they haven't been operated in the interest of the country.
Yeah.
And if anything, if there's one piece of learning we got out of Bala, which guided us to write that law the way it was written, it is that species of contract, because it is a power play, to go back to my original point about the size of parties, because it is a power play, it needs to be conducted in an atmosphere of clarity and stability on a rules-based
But should there be
process, not a smoke-filled room. You see my point?
But should
so that is my response to you on that point.
But should the procurement regulator be given, let's describe it as coercive power over a government-to-government contract relationship?
Let me answer you.
Yeah.
Because I give you what my preference is. Let me deal with another layer down. Let's go one layer down into the thing.
Right.
Because we're now touching and concerning a constitutional issue.
Yes.
You see, I'm not a lawyer, but to become a surveyor, you have to study law.
Yes.
And you have to look deep into these things. Now, listen to me. Section 4 and 5 of the Constitution. If you're going to infringe on those rights, you have to have the Act of Parliament that is being proposed to the House by a special majority.
Right.
And of course, the Parent Act was created in that manner.
Right.
What I understand, talking to some of my partners who are seasoned lawyers in this thing, what I understand is that the channel that was used to amend this law was a channel that goes like this, and you gentlemen will correct me if I'm wrong. There's an understanding that goes like this. If you have a law that is passed by special majority because it did infringe upon some of the rights in 4 and 5, if you have a law like that, and it is going to be amended in a manner that reduces its scope, or reduces its powers, then that doesn't need a special majority. That can be done by a simple majority. That is what some people I have respect for in law have made me understand that.
I would agree with the general proposition. It would depend on the clause and the framing of the specific clause.
So that general proposition, it appears to me that is what they were sailing under. They were sailing under that flag.
Correct.
But let's get into the question you're raising. Let's put this now for examination in that light. Turning on that light now to see it in that UV light. What that is doing, the arrangement that you and I have been discussing, is an arrangement where, in fact, there are now 2 species of contract in the country. There's a contract you and I could get if we set up a company to do roofing.
Right.
And HEC put out a contract for roofing. They had a big storm and they had to replace 200 roofs. And you and I put a contract in to replace 200 roofs for HEC. And you and I would be subject to certain rules and regulations.
We would be subject to scrutiny.
Within the OPR's rules and regulations.
Right.
And a foreign country entering a government-to-government arrangement with the HDC to build 300 homes, which is many times larger than our contract to fix a few roofs.
Yeah, would not
Their
be.
contract, because it is sailing under the flag of government to government, could in fact come under reduced or in fact excluded from the
So
OPR. I am saying that appears to me
equality of treatment
to breach the provisions of Section 4 with relation to equality of treatment by a public authority.
Yeah.
And I am then raising the question now.
Yeah.
You see how interesting it is?
Yeah.
Whether in fact that flag we were sailing under to amend the act because we were reducing the powers of the OPR is in fact a sound basis on which to conclude this piece of amendment if in fact we have opened the vista of irregularity of treatment by public authorities. You see how interesting it is?
Yeah. Well, you would engage constitution. Once you engage constitutional rights, you're going to have to look at whether you have the sufficient majority and get into proportionality and all those arguments.
But if we go into specific, let's play devil's advocate now, and we go into the specific government-to-government arrangements. Now, some may argue that if you go fully transparent in terms of these contracts and these arrangements between government and government, we may very well be left with some countries not willing to do business with us, because some countries may not prefer if all of the details of these informations are left for public scrutiny, right? Now, is it that, so we may be left out if it is that some of these government-to-government
are you willing to sacrifice? Are you willing to sacrifice transparency on the altar of international relations?
Yes.
And I mean, I suppose that's a political question. I suspect your answer would be no.
No. Because at the end of the day, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I'm living in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah.
Apart from some years I lived overseas, I'm living here my whole life. I don't have any plan to go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to be here for the distance. I believe this is a very serious business of nation building.
Yeah.
And all of the conscientious citizens in the country have to understand how serious this moment is.
Yeah.
The way you put that question just now was really beautifully cruel.
Yeah.
Because you put the question very eloquent, but you're putting a hard thing to me to say to me, well, listen, if we're going down your road, we mightn't get any opportunities to develop the country.
Well, lawyers aren't known to ask easy questions.
I know. And ultimately, what we're looking at is a situation where that could be, I would have to say, a kind of a false choice we're being given.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a situation where nobody is going to do contracts with you or nobody. And in fact, we need to ask the question, when you look at public-private partnerships and government-to-government, we need to ask some very detailed questions. Let me put something to you young men. You're a young man, obviously you've been thinking about this thing. You're professional men and you're conscientious. Mm-hmm. Let me put a point to you. There was a large contract last year with the Chinese contractor called CGGC.
Yeah.
China Gizbu General Contractors, which was signed with the HDC under the flag of a public-private partnership. That was signed with plenty fanfare. The picture of the signing, it's all on my blog, afraraymond.net. The picture of the signing is very interesting. Mr. Al-Rawi is there. He's the AG. He was the MP for that part of San Fernando. There was a project in San Fernando, one in Sealots.
Yeah. Right.
Marlene McDonald was there. The housing minister was there.
Yeah.
Mr. Dennis Moses, who was the foreign minister at the time. I want you all to listen to the point I'm making. Mr. Dennis Moses was in a picture to sign a housing contract.
Right.
The Chinese ambassador was in the picture. And we are being told now that because we wrote it up, we analyzed it and we criticized it, and about 2 weeks later they dropped the whole thing and they canceled the project.
Yeah.
And when we were challenging them, well, who approved it?
Yeah.
Major General Dillon could not have just gone a morning and signed a contract. Somebody must have told him this is good to go. Let's arrange to sign it next week.
Yeah.
And the people flying and so on and so on. So who approved it? Did the AG approve it? And I'm asking the question whether that contract was in fact a government-to-government arrangement. Yeah. Mr. Imbert has actually spent 2 or 3 occasions in the last few days denying it.
Yeah.
Saying it wasn't a government-to-government arrangement. Let me put a small point to you two gentlemen. A contract, really, the contents of a contract would really be things that you and I are capable of contracting on.
Yes.
If I have a piece of land and you want to build a building on it, and you're a contractor, we could have a contract because you have the material and I have the land, and we could do a contract that reflects the both interests and so on, okay?
Yeah.
That contract that we are being told. Are you there? Hello? Did we have a break in transmission?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we back?
Okay, no problem.
We seeing each other?
Yes,
Yeah,
sorry. Had a short,
no problem.
They had a short
break in the current, but we're
in
back.
The current,
Right.
yeah, so we're back
no
now.
problem. Something in the matrix. It happens like that. When they get into the points sometimes.
Discussion is becoming a bit seditious.
Yeah, it's getting a little too serious.
Yes.
Okay, coming back to the point. If we look at that contract, I want to put 2 or 3 pieces of evidence from the contract. And I have the contract on soft copy, 290 pages.
Right.
For you gentlemen to consider. 1, the contract actually guaranteed within it the actual timetable that the Chinese contractor would be repaid VAT. So that's not an HEC's control, is it?
Wow.
I'm giving you all, and you can go to my blog and see the clause numbers and everything.
Yeah.
Secondly, the contract also guaranteed the attendance of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, to wit, that 1 police car with an armed officer would be on site at all times.
Wow. Which is not usually a facility that's given.
No, but the point I'm making is that is HEC capable of contracting that? I'm making a point, gentlemen. I'm making a point.
Yeah.
And thirdly, which is in support of the second point, thirdly, the contract actually contained guarantees as to how many work permits the Chinese will get. I think it's about 650.
So clearly,
I don't know that the HEC gives out work permits.
Yeah, clearly there had to be state intervention or approval of that contract.
Absolutely.
Well,
so I'm making a point
if the
that it
minister
very
for
closely
Foreign Affairs at that
resembles a
time
government-to-government arrangement,
Yeah.
and deserves a close reading. I'm giving all you a big cookie to go with. It deserves a close reading because it actually would illustrate this thing about the benefits, the so-called benefits. It deserves a close reading.
No, we'll definitely look into it.
Well, one of the last things maybe we could discuss, because we have to go just now. Do you see any service? Well, there is the argument that, look, there are some services, obviously legal services have been said, that should be exempted from this. Do you see any scope for any service being exempted?
Yes. Well, let me talk about that. I'm glad you raised it because it was something I meant to raise in my earlier remarks. We got caught up discussing government to government and public-private, and we never got to the list of professional services. So let's talk about that. So one of the concerns raised, mostly from the government side, was about the fact that if you need to get a doctor, which is a kind of false red flag thing. I mean, try to imagine the Ministry of Transport needed to get a doctor for an eye operation. I mean, please, these stories are like they made up on the spot on the steps of the Parliament. The Ministry of Transport don't need a doctor to do an eye surgery on somebody who just got hit with a maxi. It's just like real stories that have been Point about it is this. Because we are accustomed in the country to making decisions without data, I am from a profession that is data-driven.
Yes.
Surveying is a science of measurement. I'm a surveyor. I'm a chartered surveyor. We measure things all the time. We compare figures with other figures, and that's what we do. And let me tell you all something. What we need to get for those areas of professional work, legal, financial services, accounting and auditing, medical, we needed to get what in statistics we call a frequency distribution for how the money is spent. So if you were able to say, on looking at the frequency distribution across the state, that in fact 90% of the briefs that the state issues are for professional fees for lawyers of less than $75,000. Let's just say, we're just making a discussion. We could propose a threshold to deal with your question about efficiency in a balance with oversight, we could propose a threshold that said, listen, if a ministry or state enterprise has to spend professional fees on a case of the type that is unlikely to go above 75,000, they can do it on the signature of the PS or the procurement officer and submit the details later to the OPR. In the Section 29 report that is referred to in the proposed amendment.
Correct.
So, but because we are not accustomed in the country, on either side of the parliament, to making decisions based on numbers and on facts, that sort of proposal or that sort of perspective is missing from the discussion. So I hope that will help you to understand. I believe some things could, I wouldn't say excluded, but could be differently managed Yes?
Yeah.
So we maintain a good pace of activity when it's necessary.
Correct.
And also safeguard the public purse.
Yeah.
That's my answer to you.
Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Yeah, I
All right,
think,
well,
Mr. Raymond.
Mr. Raymond, thank you very much for joining us. We hope to have you another time.
I'll be
so
happy
probably
to join you.
sometime next year, and we could have another discussion on this issue.
Okay,
Now,
great.
before you
Thank
go,
very
Mr.
much.
Raymond,
Go on.
I want to ask you one quick question before you go.
Sure. Go on.
You have been advocating for that level of transparency. Is there any, because I know like Germany and France, for example, they have certain instances where government to government contracts are excluded. In terms of the level of transparency that you are advocating for, are there any countries that you know of that have these
Somebody asked me that in the media a few days ago. I think it was my good friend, that troublemaker, Fazir Mohammed. And I answered him in one word: Ghana.
Ghana.
Look it up; it's beautiful. And in
As a
fact,
paragon.
ironically enough,
As a yes, so that is what
the law was written by Trinidadian. So on that note,
Thank you, Mr.
Take care,
Raymond.
Mr. Raymond. Yeah.
thank you very much.
All the best.
Have a good day. Bye bye.